Hey everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone is doing well this Monday evening. This video is going out a little late and I do apologize for that. The internet actually went out a bit earlier, so it has kind of slowed me down here. But we are in time for the 8 o'clock advisory and there's a lot of juicy details here, mainly comprised around these two systems here. These are not tropical cyclones as of yet, but we have one that's pretty much on the verge of becoming one, and then we also have one that's just popped off of the West African coast here. So things are getting pretty busy. So as you can see on satellite, we have Erin over here. Erin is still a category 4 as of right now. The fourth speed is slowed and the storm is beginning to take that turn off to the north here. We've finally gone from that westward direction to west northwest now to now northwest. So I would expect that jog off to the north to continue. This isn't going to directly affect land. We're not going to see any landfall from this. But an interesting thing to make note of here is the fact that we do now have tropical storm watches for the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And this is due in large part not really much with the storm's proximity, but the wind field itself. When that storm weakened from category 5, Erin wasn't a huge storm back then, but it was very powerful. But as the storm went through this eye wall replacement cycle and the storm just took its time doing so, we ended up seeing the overall size of the storm, the overall size of the wind field increase dramatically. This storm, to put it in perspective for you, if you were to put this in the heart of the U.S., it would take up most of it here. So that's just telling you just how big this storm has grown, because when it was a Cat 5, it was much smaller. The wind field was very small. We had hurricane force winds that were maybe about 45 miles away from the center. Now we're getting close to about 80 plus miles away from the center at this point. So it's a pretty big storm to say the least here. The impacts beyond the increase of the wind threat here. So tropical storm force winds above 39 miles an hour possible now with this, but we haven't changed all that much here. We still have the threat for rip currents and increased surf. And I would expect that to continue throughout the next couple of days here. By the time we get into late Thursday, I would expect that threat to diminish as the storm finally starts to pass through here and pretty much remain a fish storm. I would expect no impacts to land directly again, as we mentioned before. So what I'm most interested in really from this point, since we aren't expecting a direct landfall here, is really these other two systems here. And normally I reserve this more for the tropical outlook videos we do, not so much the updates, but considering the fact that things have developed as quickly as they have, especially with this area here having a 60% chance of development, we're going to go ahead and kind of put our focus more so towards these two areas for the rest of the video here. So we're going to go ahead now and take a look at our model data here. Of course, as we know, we have the GFS ensemble here and then the Euro on the bottom left corner. I'm just going to make our comparison, and really it's not much of a comparison. We know the drill at this point during peak season. The wind shear really starts to lighten up. We've been talking about this over the last few weeks. It almost really feels like a month now at this point. But the wind shear is light. We already know the sea surface temperature here are baking at this, are pretty much bath water at this point, you can say. So we're well past the 80-degree threshold just across the board. There is a little bit of upwelling that's going to be a thing because of Erin, which could slow things down just a little bit, but you would almost have to be in the exact coattails of a major hurricane to really feel those effects of upwelling. So I don't think that our next named system will have anything to worry about in regards to that. So between the sea surface temperatures and the shear, I would expect at some point to get a named storm pretty soon here, which would be our F name. But in regards to any sort of inhibiting factors, if there was anything that I would bet my money on potentially slowing down the storm, it might be some dry air. But we'll have to see how things progress with that. So as you can see, these areas in the brown, this is where our dry air is going to be. In particular, I really like to follow this area up here. It's a Saharan dust that we often end up watching coming from North Africa that could slow these storms down. We aren't going to see too much of an impact of that in the short range here. Maybe towards the long range, we might have a better opportunity at that. But I wouldn't be relying on this to stop this system or potentially this system. It does look like a little bit more dry air comes into play once we get past the 7 to 10 day mark. But again, really at this point, looking into the long range, it's kind of early to tell much of anything. Now, one other detail that I'm paying close attention to is where this high pressure ends up setting up, because that could act like a steering current, especially as these storms continue to mature here, which we know that they potentially can and likely will do. But as these storms get stronger, they get caught up by these upper air currents that you'll see from these ridges that have popped up here, and usually that's how we end up getting that turn to the north. There are little sub features that we have to watch here as well, which can allow these storms to go further off towards the west, but the weaker that they are, the more to the south and west they end up staying. But in either case, it looks like for the most part, whether we're looking at either the GFS or the Euro, I would say that impacts to land, if I was to go off of this, which really at this point I'm not, I would say that impacts to land are relatively minimal for the U.S. Maybe over towards the Caribbean, that's a little bit different. But obviously with us being so far out of range, getting into the 10 to 15 day range, can't really put a whole lot of merit into it at this time here. Models can easily change within that time frame. So last but not least, we're going to, of course, take a look at our ensembles here. So you can already see the European ensemble in motion. Here's the GFS ensemble in motion. And you can see Erin right here popping up on the screen. And then here are our next two low pressure areas that we're going to be watching over the coming days. You can see how everything's kind of spread out. There's no real set area of agreement as to where these pieces of energy are flying off to at this point. They could easily end up going out to sea. There's some that'll bring it close to the Bahamas. Some may even make it to U.S. soil. But for the most part, it's kind of all over the place, and it really doesn't matter which model that you look at here. It's just a lot of uncertainty at this point. So no point in drawing a cone, no point in trying to draw up any sort of concern for anyone at this point. We're kind of in a wait and see mode, so to speak. Not in a nowcast situation where, okay, we won't find out until the day of or anything like that. We're literally weeks out from really having any answers in regards to anything in general. So a good reflection of that. If you don't want to go off the Euro and GFS ensembles here, we're looking at multiple types of ensembles here, even going beyond GFS and the Euro, and we're all over the place here. This is looking into the 10-day range here. Let me take that off the screen. And for the most part, looking at where these two low pressures pop up here, you can't really see much of anything in regards to where it goes. A lot of these look like they go out to sea, which is a reassuring trend, but there are still some that push it towards the Gulf, that push low pressure areas towards the Gulf. So it could go either way. So definitely urge you to stay tuned if you're in an area of concern. But as of right now, if you see anyone saying that, oh, this is going to be heading right at you within these next couple of days, don't feed into that. Don't pay them any attention, because they're just trying to get clicks. But that being said here, everyone, hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday. I'm sorry this video came up late, and I appreciate all the support, and I will see you next time.